This episode is sponsored by Kendo UI. Kendo UI allows you to build better apps faster. They have a comprehensive library ranging from data grids and charts to buttons and sliders. Plus, you can use their components as plain JavaScript as well as in Angular, React, and Vue. They have a large collection of customizable popular themes like Bootstrap and Material. Go check them out at reactroundup.com/KendoUI. Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of React Roundup. This week on our panel we have Nader Davitt.
Hello.
I'm Charles Max Wood from devchat.tv. And yeah, I took a little break, but I'm back. Lucas was also here, but we're having trouble getting him back. There was a little bit of confusion as to how to get connected today. So anyway, hopefully he shows up. But we have a special guest this week, and that's Luis Vieira.
Hey, hello everyone.
And now, do you want to introduce yourself real quick? Let people know who you are, where you work, what you do.
Yeah, so as you said, my name is Luis. I work in Portugal at a company called FarFetch. I'm a front-end architect there. I work mostly on JavaScript stuff, more on the core side of things, infrastructure, shared components, that kind of stuff. And that's mostly it.
Gotcha. Now, you wrote an article called Building Large-Scale React Applications in a Monorepo.
Yep.
And I know a lot of people, they hear the word monorepo and they kind of cringe. So do you want to give us some of the rationale there before we talk about why? Why do you want to put it in monorepo?
Yeah. Well, here monorepo is mostly in the sense of dividing a project in multiple packages. So to create a loosely coupled separation between them, and also to facilitate the sharing code between projects, because when you start having shared components between multiple applications in multiple repositories, things tend to get hard to test and update, to know what you need to test when you make a change, if you've broken something or not. Then testing across multiple packages is hard. You need to npm link, and that doesn't always work as expected. So there are some issues, and this happens mostly in large scale projects and organizations where you have lots of components and lots of different projects. So what I was trying to solve with this was mostly that, trying to share code between applications and trying to make changes to that code, but in a safe way, and trying to keep it in a maintainable way. And that led me to this notion of monorepo. It's similar to how many projects in the JavaScript community are organized. You can look at, for example, Babel and Jest and so on. They're organized as monorepos, so projects that are made of multiple packages. Some of them use Yarn workspaces, some of them use Lerna, some of them use both. It depends. But here, monorepo is not in the sense that you put all the code in your organization inside one repository like Google does, or similar to what I think Facebook also does. This is more like you have one application and like one domain, and the shared code between that domain goes inside one repository to facilitate this workflows and the maintainability of that code.
Yeah, I like the idea of basically if I have two pieces of code that are likely to change together. You know, you brought up shared components as an example. So if I have a shared component that I'm editing, then I can go make all the changes related to that shared component and do one commit.
Yeah, the thing is, if you have one component that is used by, 20 different projects, it's hard to test against all of them and to know if your changes are safe or not. And you can also make a breaking change to a component inside a monorepo and update all the users of that component. So, and you probably will have to do it if you work in a monorepo. So it makes you like it can make breaking changes harder, which can be a good thing, and it makes you like it obligates you to be more honest about breaking changes because you need to update the colors. So that's one thing that comes out of it. But this also requires some specific tooling to make this work. I've mentioned Yarn workspaces, also Lerna. Those are some of the most popular tools. But if you have multiple projects inside one repository, when you make a change, you probably don't want to test them all always. So you'll probably want to know what projects are affected by a change you've done and test only those projects. And that requires some more specific tooling that you probably may have to develop yourself. I'm not sure if there's things like that. I know that Lerna allows you to see what's changed since, for example, master, and you can ask Lerna to run a script, for example, on only the packages that have changed from comparing your branch to master, for example. And that's one way you can approach this.
So it sounds like the trade-off is complexity, and you have to bring in extra tools to help you manage some of the stuff.
It simplifies a lot of things in terms of managing the dependencies between different projects, but it requires some more advanced tooling. Yeah.
You mentioned Lerna. Can you talk about that for a second? Because I've heard the name Lerna quite a bit lately, but I've never actually used it, so I'm not sure exactly what it does.
Yeah. Lerna basically is a set of scripts to help you manage multiple packages inside a monorepo. So you have multiple packages inside one repository, and Lerna gives you scripts to run other scripts on all the packages to publish those packages. It also has some commands to manage dependencies, or you can opt out of that and use Yarn to manage it for you. So it's basically, so you can, let's say you have a monorepo that has 5 different packages. You can run a command like Lerna build, and Lerna will run the build command on all of those five packages for you. And so if those packages inside the repository, they depend on each other, like Lerna creates symlinks between those packages. So packages inside one repository always use the latest source code available. So they're always updated. And when you make an update to a package, Lerna sees what other packages use it, and it updates the version of the package that you've made your update, and updates the version of the dependence of the packages that consume it, and then it can publish them all to, for example, npm all at once. So it manages all of that for you.
One thing that I'm wondering about is if I say I have several packages that I'm using in my application, and I put them all in one repo, how do I deal with things like the Git history getting messed up? Because aren't you going to get a big long Git history that may or may not have to do with whatever you're concerned about?
Yeah, the Git history gets much bigger, but it's always, your commits are always related to the packages that you're working on. But the history gets mixed. Yeah, it depends on how you're working that. You can annotate your commits. So like I've touched this package and so on. So, and yeah, you can do stuff like it. But yeah, the project gets bigger in size and in history. So yeah, that's one of the trade-offs.
Hi, Luis. It's Lucas here.
Hey, hello.
Hello. So you spoke about versioning before. I have a question. We work a lot with semantic versioning here. So it's like the publishing generates the Semver version automatically based on the Git messages, right? How is the interplay with Monorepo? Is there like a good story or?
Yeah, Lerna has some good tools to manage that. They have support for conventional commits. You know it? Yeah. So you can annotate your commits with a prefix like fix, patch, or breaking change or stuff like it. And then Lerna can use that information to determine the version of the package to be published. And it can also update the consuming packages accordingly. So yeah, in that sense, you have good tools to do that. So if you go to the Lerna website, lerna.js.io, you can see all of that information there. I think they mentioned the conventional commit support in there. That's what I use currently to determine the version of the packages to be published.
What if you're not doing semantic versioning? Then you just have to do it manually?
Yeah, it can prompt you to say you've changed these packages. What version do you want to publish? And you can do it manually also. You can, if you have 5 packages, you've changed 3. You manually say, I want to publish version X of this, Y of that, and so on. So it has both options. I like the conventional commits because it forces you to follow a convention on your commits, and it makes things automatic. And then if you want to publish your packages, let's say on a CI server, it can do it automatically for you also, and properly determining the version to be published.
Yeah, that's good. Another question, and this is a big concern I have before like starting a Monorepo for at least for like a big application in a company or something like that, is how is the state of the CI tooling regarding that? Because like how smart are these tools to like only run the actual tests that you need to run and things like that? Because I can imagine that if it's done like naively, you could take like days to run like a super simple change because it needs to run everything. So how is the state of the tooling on CI?
Can I jump in before you answer this? Because I also see that what you're seeing as a weakness could also be a strength, because if I make a small change, then everything gets tested against it. And so I know that everything works with it. So I think it just depends on the context of the change and whether or not you want to run everything. But yeah.
If a project gets too big, running everything always can be a bit impractical because it can take a long time. But the CI tools normally they don't give you that out of the box. You have to properly configure that in your project and then tell CI to run the scripts that will do that for you. But you have to make some custom configurations to your project to make that work properly. But what I'm trying to work with is like I'm using Jest and I'm trying to use some Lerna commands to figure out which packages have changed and telling Jest to just test those projects. And Jest is very good on that. On end-to-end side of things, if you have 2 different applications inside a project, you probably only want to run the end-to-end tests of the application that was affected by your change. And in there, you will need to make some custom scripts because there aren't many tools that are as good as Jest in that sense. So yeah, you'll need to create some custom scripts in there. You'll need to invest in some tooling. At least from my experience, that's what I found out. Yeah, that you'll need to make some custom scripts to make this work like very fluid in a very large manner. Because if you have like a medium-sized thing, like I've worked on repositories that have like 10 or 20 different React components. I have no problems running all the tests all the time. But if I have a project that has like 10 different components and more than one application inside, there I would invest in creating some more advanced scripts to make that happen.
Yeah, I asked that because I talked to some people that work at Google, and it seems that Google, they're very like heavy Monorepo users. I don't have a lot of information on that, but it seems that inside Google, and they have this custom-made build tool that they are open sourcing. I think it's called Blaze. I'll look up here. but it seems that the open source version is still not like as complete as the one they use inside, and it's like you still need to have some custom made stuff, right?
Yeah. The open source version that they have, I think it's called Bazel or Bazel. I'm not sure how it's pronounced, but the Google approach, they put, from what I've read, almost all of the organization code in one repository. That's why they have those massive scale issues. So I'm not an advocate for that. So like my approach is more like inside a domain on your company, try to put all the projects that are related in one repository to make working on them easier and updating shared code easy, but not all the organization code, because that will require some very custom tooling. I think I've even read that Google has abandoned Git because Git couldn't scale to the size of their repository, so they've created some custom tooling in there.
Yeah, I've spoken to a number of people that work at Google, either on the Angular team or on some of the applications that use Angular, because we have an Angular podcast. And yeah, I mean, most of what you're saying is pretty spot on with Bazel. And yeah, everything there, with the exception of like Angular and a few other things that are open source that other people are using, they're all in that monorepo. They're all in the same repo, and they all use the same build system, which is Blaze internally and Bazel externally.
Yeah, currently, I'm more focused on React. But for example, if I'm building like a component library, a style guide for an application of components, I found that it's much easier to maintain them if you put them all in a monorepo. Like for a component library, I wouldn't think twice. What I'm trying to do now and experimenting with is having the application that consumes those components also inside that repository. So, okay. And that's it. I don't want to put anything else in there. That's enough for me. Then if I'm making other application, I would create it on the side.
I think that's an interesting point that you're making there, is that the monorepo isn't a solution for put all of your stuff in the same bucket, right? It's put all the related stuff in a bucket and then put all the other stuff that relates to, internally in another bucket.
Yeah, you can approach it in both ways, really, but that's how I approached it. But yeah.
So one other thing that I saw in your article that I want you to address briefly is a lot of people have built monolithic applications, and those kind of go into a monorepo, and there are problems that occur with the maintainability of that. Mm-hmm. And I've been guilty of building those. So what's the difference between a monolithic application and a monorepo?
Okay, so having all the code in the same place doesn't mean that we're building a monolith of pieces that are intertwined together, and the relation between them is not really clear. So here we can have a clear separation of packages and of components as if they were built as separate pieces. The only thing that changes is that the pieces are in the same place, but the architecture of the application and the coupling between those pieces is still very separated. That part doesn't change just because they are under the same repository. You can even have like some linking rules that don't allow you to import internals of a package that's inside that monorepo. You have to directly consume the package as if it was from NPM, so that you can't create that tight coupling between the packages that are inside the monorepo.
Gotcha. So how do you structure your monorepo then? I mean, if you have a whole bunch of different packages that you're building in it, it sounds like Lerna helps you with that. But yeah, how do you put them in there, just the file structure and things?
Yeah, what I'm currently trying to do is like I have two folders that are managed by Lerna, one for apps and another for components. And inside those folders, I have inside the apps folder, for example, I have the apps. They have folders for each app that is inside that repository. Inside the components folder, folders for each component, shared libraries, etc. And each folder is a npm package has its own package JSON, its own set of scripts, etc. So, and the applications consume the packages as if I was consuming them from npm. But as Lerna links the code together, though instead of going to npm picking up that code, the application goes to the repository and picks the latest version of the code. So that's the overall structure. And then I use Lerna to run scripts across all of those packages. So let's say I want to run the build command. It can run Babel on each of the components I have in the repository. And then it can run, for example, Webpack on the application. So I have everything built. And what I'm trying to do currently is like when I change the component, I use Lerna internals to determine the package graph and to see which applications inside my monorepo use that component, and trying to create a set of scripts to determine the minimum set of tests that I need to do to make sure that my change is safe.
So if you have different scripts, or if you have the same script running across all these different like areas in your application, I'm guessing that you have to have consistent naming conventions and things and scripts in your package.json, or can you put those all in one place and have them run across the entire app?
You can choose. You can configure one, for example, for the build example that I've said. So you can create like an npm build script in each package, on the packages of each package. You can do that. Or in the root of the project, you can create a script that goes to all the folders and runs some scripts in there. You can choose. Having the script configured in each package can be useful if, for example, you are using Babel on the components and you want to one by one migrate them to TypeScript or things like it. You can configure one component to be built using TypeScript, other using Babel, and another using another thing. So it can facilitate things in that sense. But if you want to keep things consistent and always built in the same way, you can, in the root package JSON of the monorepo configure that. So what I currently do, I put all the dev dependencies under a root package JSON so that they are all consistent between the packages of that repository. And I configure a set of scripts on the root to run the same thing on all of them to keep things consistent.
Deploy more, pay less with DigitalOcean, the simplest all-in-one cloud computing platform for developers. Scale and run cloud applications faster and more efficiently with effortless administration tools to robust compute, flexible configurations, networking services, real-time alerts, and rapid provisioning, while enjoying industry-leading price to performance with a flat pricing structure across all global data center regions at any usage volume. Spend more time building better web apps and less time worrying about managing infrastructure with DigitalOcean. Build your next app on DigitalOcean. Get started with a free $100 credit at do.co/roundup.
But you can choose how you want to approach that. If you're migrating things and if you have a set of different technologies being used, you can configure a script on each package and it will build things for you.
I'm kind of curious also about continuous integration and continuous deployment across an application like this. Does this change the way that you have to think about that stuff? Is it harder? Is it easier? Or does it matter?
Well, in my approach, after I have the scripts configured, what I run in my machine to determine what needs to be tested is what I run on CI. So after you have those sets of scripts aligned, you can run them in both places. So what I'm currently doing is like I have a set of scripts that, for example, if you run npm test, I can test the whole repository. But if you run npm test with a flag, for example, affected or changed or something like it, I determine what has been changed in the repository using a set of git commands and so on. And then it only tests what was changed and affected by the change you've made. And then I run that same set of scripts on CI also. So after you have the tooling configured, you can run it in both places.
So if I have a project that's spread across multiple repositories, is it worth pulling them into a monorepo, or should I just continue where I'm at?
Well, if you have like one application that consumes code maintained by your company internally, like from several different repositories, I think it makes things easier. Yeah, in terms of maintainability and integration of things, I find that it keeps things simpler. Because when I make a change that's to a package that's consumed by several different other projects, it's really hard to know what will happen. And sometimes what happens is people get afraid of touching that code and it gets unmaintained. So having things in this structure can make it easier in that sense. So when you make a change, you immediately know what will happen, if things will work or not.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if it's worth doing the migration. If you hear this and you're going, that makes sense. I like the trade-offs, but yeah, is it worth copying all that code over to one repo?
Lerna has a command called import. It will pick up your repository and import it to the monorepo with your Git history and all that stuff. So you can try that. It's pretty cool.
That makes sense, and that sounds like it's not terribly difficult then.
Yeah, well, it can depend on your project and the configurations you have. But if you're publishing your project as an NPM package, it should be pretty straightforward migrating to the monorepo. Because Lerna is made for managing NPM packages. So if it's an NPM package that you have in multiple repositories, yeah, I believe that it will be easier to import them to a monorepo.
Yeah, it's this part of the development that you talked about. Like it's very difficult when you have libraries and a bunch of repositories. It's very difficult to know what depends on this particular project, right? The other answer is really easy. Like what this project depends on, we have a package JSON for that. The other way around, like if I change this, like which places should I go to update this breaking change? And usually like you have those not touched often applications that in 3 months someone will touch and have to do like two breaking. So this is it always, if you think about it, also brings a little bit of risk, right? Because like you're touching a lot of code a lot of the time. So sometimes people are afraid to touch some code that is like running and sometimes this fear is like justified because the more code you commit, you have a higher risk. So you believe that this is like a good price to pay, right?
Yeah. So I think it can give you more confidence in to make changes to shared code, and it makes it easier also to create shared libraries, because sometimes if you're working on an application, you can drag a folder below and you've created a shared library, which can sometimes be hard in a company, because then you need to create a repository, you need to create a pipeline, and then pipelines will be spread across very different repositories. You need to maintain them all, like dev environments, build configurations, etc. Linting and all that stuff will get under different versions and all of that on all of those repositories. So it can become hard to maintain if they start spreading a lot. So yeah, I think that there are obviously trade-offs that you have to consider. But one thing that I think we haven't discussed is like if we have like many contributors to a repository, let's say that you have like 200 people contributing at the same time to a repository, you may need to have some tooling around managing the merge requests, etc. And things like it. I've seen some articles on companies that use merge bots to say like when a merge request gets approved, you assign it to a merge bot and it will take care it will create a queue and take care of merging that code safely for you without merging on top of each other. Because when you have like 100 or 200 contributors, like it can get hard. And when you have a project with that scale, also CI time is important, because you don't want to wait like 4 hours for your code to get deployed or something like it. So that's why in those very large scale repositories, you need to make an investment in tooling upfront. Yeah. If you're making a repository with 20 packages inside, those packages are relatively small components. Things go smoothly just using Lerna with Yarn or something like it. But if you have a project that is bigger in size with a lot of contributors, the tooling investment is needed to make things smooth.
So this is the trade-off, right? So the trade-off is the complexity in CI mostly, right? In exchange of a smoother development experience. Makes sense.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to do is like create a project that has some scripts to handle these cases and provide this to teams that want to work in this model. So you have a centralized place that has these tools, and you can give this to teams, and they get this by default. Because once you have this solved, things can go pretty smoothly.
This isn't really React specific, but do you recommend putting backend code in a monorepo, or is this more kind of this discussion really more around just front end projects?
Boy, take it to the Wild West.
You can. I've seen examples of having like the application and the backend of the application and shared UI components and libraries all in the same place. And you mentioned that I talked a lot about React, but I took a lot of inspiration from the Angular projects that work in this way. I don't know if you heard about a project called NX. It's
by Narwhal.
Narwhal.
It's an extension of the Angular CLI.
Yeah. They are very big proponents of this way of working, and they have very, very good tooling for this, and it's open source. It's very good. If you are into Angular, I'll advise you to check that out, because many of the scripts I built, I went to Narwhal to see how they do things. Yeah, their project is really cool. They have some very good tools to work on that. So if you're working on Angular, the tooling issue is probably solved for you already. Yeah, and I've also seen some things that Angular has some projects that they are trying to adopt Bazel as a build tool. And I think that NX also has some things with Bazel, at least some experimental stuff. So they're working on that. And they have some good talks on ngconf, I think, about working in this way. There's also a very good talk that's called Building Angular Applications Like Google. Then they also talk about this way of working. And if you go to my article in the end, you have links to all of these talks. So, yeah, that's where I took most of the inspiration to work in this way. Basically, I'm trying to make this work for React.
That's one thing that I'm wondering about here when we're talking about building large-scale React applications in a monorepo. Does React make this easier or harder? Or is it about the same as anything else like Vue or React or Angular or something else?
Well, I don't have much experience here with Angular or Vue, to be honest. So I can't tell you if one is harder than the other. I can tell you that I didn't have many difficulties adapting these concepts to a React application. So I think that they mostly work in the same way. Like they have components. Angular has like ng modules, I think. I don't know how it works in Vue, but the implementing these concepts for React applications was pretty straightforward, actually.
So let me ask you while they're thinking if there's anything else they want to ask.
Okay.
If people want to find you online, looks like you post to Medium, but are there other places where people can find you? How do they find all of your stuff?
Well, mostly Medium and Twitter are my main the main ways you can find me online.
And what's your handle? I see on Medium it's Luis Vieira, and I'll just spell that out so people can find you _GMR. So it's LuisVieira _GMR.
Yeah.
And is that the same on Twitter?
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, Lucas and Nader don't look like they're burning to ask any more questions. So we'll jump over to picks and do some picks. Is your job search stuck? Maybe you're not getting any interviews with employers, or maybe you are, but no job offers. Or you may be new and not even know where to start. This is Charles Max Wood, and I'm releasing a new course and ebook on how to find a job as a software developer. The course walks you through the process of finding the types of companies you want to work for, getting their attention, and putting your best foot forward as the candidate they want. I've coached dozens of developers in looking for jobs and have been able to help several people find jobs within 2 weeks to 2 months. So whether you're new to development, can't find a great job that fits what you want, or are looking for remote work from an area without a strong tech community, I can help. Go to getacoderjob.com and sign up today. Nader, do you want to start us off with picks?
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to be giving a free workshop with Tyler McGinnis. It's going to be streamed live. You can also go back and watch it. It's going to happen in the next month and a half. We haven't released the date. But if you're interested in that, just follow me on Twitter or go to Tyler McGinnis' website and subscribe to his newsletter, and you'll get notified when that comes out. And then also, React Native EU is coming out. Is going to be a conference, and I think it's in September, early September. I'm going to be there giving a workshop on building cloud-enabled mobile applications with React Native and AWS. If you're interested in React Native, come out to the conference. It's going to be a great time. Also, I'm going to be writing a few blog posts around that subject later on this month. So again, if you're interested in learning how to build cloud-enabled mobile apps with React Native or with React, actually check out those posts.
And is your workshop with Tyler in person or online?
It's actually online, yeah. So anyone can come. It's completely free. We'll have a GitHub repository for you to follow along, and also some stuff to do at the end of each session. It's going to be 3 days, 2 hours a day. So it's not going to take up all of your time, but it will be a couple of hours every day.
All right. And do you want to just repeat the links again so that people can find them?
Yeah. So if you just Google Tyler McGinnis, it's spelled TylerMcGinnis. It's tylermcginnis.com. And then React Native EU, you can just Google that, and the conference website should pop up.
Awesome. Lucas, what are your picks?
All right. My pick came out of a situation last week. We have this complicated visual component that we were trying to understand, like all the edge cases and stuff in this big meeting with both designers and business people. And it's very difficult to communicate those like complex behaviors and stuff like that. A lot of whiteboarding and stuff. And one of our designers, Tim Does, he brought the attention. He said, like, I think I found this tool online that may help us. And it's called Sketch Systems. Let me post here the Sketch Systems. It's a really cool website that helps you build a state machine and visualize it, and then interact with it. And this proved to be like a great tool to interact in that sense. So like everybody, people who code and people who do not code can contribute in a really complex UI behaviors using this tool. So this is my pick for the week. This state machine stuff is like blowing my mind.
Awesome. I'm going to jump in here with a couple of picks. So I mentioned at the start of the show that I had taken some time off. Y'all probably noticed if you've listened to the last few episodes, I wasn't around. But I was pretty burned out. I'd been dealing with a lot of things, kind of from the start of the year. Things have just kind of continually piled on. And what's funny is I took the time off and I really didn't get that many of those things off my plate, but just taking the time off was really important. And I think a lot of times we fail to talk about that often enough, where it's like, look, if you're overwhelmed, if you've got a lot going on, take a breather. I took about 2 weeks. The first week I worked on the systems for the podcasts. So, a lot of Rails. I'm playing with Stimulus.js right now. So I've been kind of checking that out. I've been kind of fiddling with that. And the second week, we went down to southern Utah with my wife's family and we went and played on the lake one day. I took naps when I wanted to, played a lot of board games. Did I mention that I got a little extra sleep? Anyway, it was just a really, really positive thing. So I'm just going to recommend, whatever kind of downtime you need, take it. And then the other thing is that I've been evaluating my role in the podcasts. The podcast network now has 16 shows, I think. And so, I'm sitting here going, I don't know if I can record as many shows as I'm currently recording. And so figuring out which shows and how often and how do I support the current hosts so that they can continue to do the shows because people want them. And so that's the other thing is I think it's also healthy just to take a step back and say, am I where I want to be? And am I able to accomplish the things that I want to accomplish? And for me, a lot of that boils down to how much time I get to spend with my family. And a lot of that boils down to how much of a difference I can make with the podcast being a host versus managing a lot of the production and having awesome hosts that aren't me on the show. And so, and I think we've got great hosts on all the shows, but some of the shows, they have a little bit of an issue getting recorded if I'm not there. And so figuring out, okay, how do I deal with that? Do I care to deal with that, or do I just, if I'm not there and they don't record, I have to be okay with that. And so anyway, there's a lot of evaluation there, but I hear people too, they complain about their jobs. And, when somebody finally says, well, go find a new one, it's like this light bulb goes on and they realize they're not stuck where they are. So just evaluate where you're at. Is this where I want to end up? Is this close to where I want to end up? Maybe the difference is a raise or a little bit different job description from what you're doing, but not drastically different. So yeah, figure out what the next step is for you and what'll make you happy and go for it. So I know that that's none of those are concrete picks. You can't go buy those things on Amazon, but that's kind of where I've been the last few weeks. So anyway, just give it some thought and take some time off. Luis, what are your picks?
So my pick goes to the Vue CLI. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's a pretty cool project, and I would advise you to try it even if you're not into Vue, just because of the experience they give you of bootstrapping a new project. And they also built a very cool UI on top of the CLI. So that means like the commands that you normally run, like build and start a dev server, etc., you can run them through a UI and get feedback on the UI of what's happening. And the experience is pretty cool. You can bootstrap an application in the UI. You can install plugins, configure things. You can even, I think, configure a service worker and a manifest file in that UI. So I've tried it, and the experience is pretty cool. And I thought I want this for making my React applications. So go ahead, give it a chance and try it, even if you're not into Vue, just to get inspired by the developer experience they are providing. Because I really think it's next level.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you for coming, Luis. Really appreciate it. And I encourage everybody to go check out the blog post. He has some pretty, concrete ideas about how you can do this kind of monorepo for your React apps.
Also, if you want to expand your knowledge in this, check the talks that are mentioned in the end, because they have some really, really good content on how other companies and other projects approach that.
Awesome. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and wrap this one up. Thank you all for coming.
Thanks for having us.
You.
We will catch you all next week. Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CACHEFLY.com to learn more.